Hello, content literacy people. Let me swap this so you see what it is that I want you to see. This is the online version of our seated third class session for content literacy. In this PowerPoint and the videos that I am creating from the PowerPoint, this is what we're going to accomplish. We're going to get you prepared to create your text set. We're going to talk about what you've learned in text complexity and apply that to what you're doing in your text set. We're going to get you prepared for your authentic writing task, and then also for your essential questions for your unit. And then finally, for closing, I would need to introduce you to a reading that you're going to be working on throughout the semester, broken up into different pieces, and get you ready for Module 3, basically, where you're going to be looking at some vocabulary research and other things as well. So first, text set preparations. So before we get into your text set, I'm going to share with you my model text set that I created. For this course, I've created two kind of mock units. One that's focused on, both are focused on social studies, and one is focused on, as you can see here, the roots and branches of conflict. And then another one I'll share with you tonight is focused on power and persuasion. But for the purpose of showing the text set and kind of what I'm looking for the text set, I'm going to be focusing on a unit that's for 8th grade social studies with the conceptual theme of roots and branches of conflict. And the standard, which is really the topic of the unit, which is about the U.S. Basing its military and diplomatic policies from 1945 to 1990 on a policy of containment of communism, and specifically focusing on the Vietnam War as an example of that. So before we dive into looking at that text set, I want to share with you an activity that I would have done in our seated class with something called a concept ladder. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what that looks like. Okay. There we go. Okay. So this is a concept ladder, and you would work your way up to a thorough understanding of the concept. So for the example that I'm working with today, it would be the roots and branches of conflict. And then after being presented with each text that I'm going to be showing you, you would jot down things that you're wondering and things that you're thinking. Okay, and after each one, we would stop and discuss what you're wondering and thinking with your partner or your group before you're presented with the next text. Okay, so while I would have loved to have done that activity, it's a little hard to do online, so I won't be doing that tonight. But okay, so the first thing text that I'm going to share with you from my text set on this unit of roots and branches of conflict is a brief video providing an overview of the Vietnam War. So I'm going to go ahead and show that now.
The main facts about the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War began as a regional conflict and became one of history's worst humanitarian catastrophes. It also changed the way that wars are fought and gave birth to a peace movement that is strong today. Since 1954, a proxy war had been brewing in South Asia. Communist guerrillas backed by North Vietnam, the USSR, and China, known as the Viet Cong, had been fighting the Western-backed South. The Viet Cong wanted to unite the country under one socialist flag. With the forces of the South losing the war and fearing communist expansion, the USA entered the conflict to help fight the Army of the North. The fighting quickly escalated, and successful operations turned the tide of the war in the Viet Cong's favor. By 1967, there were more than 500,000 American troops in Vietnam. In the USA, the anti-war movement was growing. Originally seen as communist sympathizers, this small group grew into a popular protest movement as ordinary Americans became angry about the deaths of soldiers and civilians and the shocking reports about the military's use of napalm and the toxic herbicide Agent Orange. After the deaths of 4 student protesters in 1970, public opinion turned against the U.S. government, and it found itself fighting a war on 2 fronts. The failure to win hearts and minds at home eventually led to the USA's withdrawal. Almost 60,000 American personnel had been killed, and over 150,000 had been wounded. The conflict was a political disaster for the USA, both at home and overseas. Although technically a victory for the North Vietnamese, up to 500,000 civilians had been killed. The total amount of casualties, both civilian and military, is believed to be over 3 million. Both sides had committed war crimes. The ripples of Vietnam can still be felt today. Such huge losses mean that, even now, the USA is unwilling to commit ground troops to conflicts. But if one positive lesson was learned, it was that ordinary people would no longer tolerate the loss of innocent lives in their names. This is a direct result of the peace movement that lives on throughout the world today, stronger than ever.
Okay, so that would be the first of the videos, of the media that I would be sharing. And at this point, we'd stop and I'd have you, jot down some things you're wondering, jot down some things that you're thinking before going on to the next text. Okay? The next text is a historical fiction picture book titled Patrol, An American Soldier in Vietnam by Walter Dean Myers and Anne Griffel-Coney, who's the illustrator. And because I can't read it aloud to you, or I could, I'm going to play a video.
Patrol, An American Soldier in Vietnam by Walter Dean Myers. The land of my enemy has wide valleys, mountains that stretch along the far horizon, rushing brown rivers, and thick green forests. My squad of 9 men are in the forest. Above me, birds twitter nervously in the treetops. Insects and small animals scurry through the underbrush, trying to avoid the crush of my combat boots. The squad leader raises his hand. We stop. The sound of my breath is soft in the morning air. Somewhere in the forest, hidden in the shadows, is the enemy. He knows I have come to kill him. He waits for me. The squad leader signals and the patrol moves out again. The brush thickens as we head toward our target. The fog, which rolls slowly at the edge of the forest, is beginning to clear. I lift my rifle and begin to rub the palm of my hand slowly along its wooden stock. The weather is hot, but the sweat that runs down my back feels cold. Shots. A firefight. I dive to the ground. My heart beats fast. I lift my rifle and fire into the green forest. Bullets sing and whine over my head. I empty my clip, sending more bullets into the trees, the bushes. In reply, the bark flies from a tree near my head. I think I see the enemy. I reload and shoot again. It is only a shadow, but I do not stop shooting. In war, shadows are enemies too. Suddenly there is silence. We are afraid to move. We are more afraid not to move. I hear the sounds of the birds again. I wonder if they speak of us from the high branches. I wonder if what they see makes them sad. I am so afraid. I want the enemy to be more afraid. I want him to tremble more than I tremble. The radio crackles in my hand as I call for bombs. crouched against a tree older than my grandfather. I imagine the enemy crouching against a tree older than his grandfather. We wait. We wait. Images of those I love come to mind. Still, we wait. Then we are startled by the sound of planes. We look up at them and see their shadows spreading over the valley's edge toward us. They pass us and do their work. The bombs explode, rumbling like thunder at a distance that is never distant enough. My body shakes. I tell myself that I will not die on this bright day. Against the horizon, columns of blue-gray smoke rise. 2 clicks away, there are flashes of gunfire. 2 clicks is the distance of my enemy. My chest tightens. I wipe my sweaty palms. I bite back my tears. We move again. We are always moving. My legs ache. My shoulders sag. My 1,000 eyes look for death in the waving bamboo fields. A village. It is our target. We circle it. We swing around, sweeping our gun sights along the windows in the huts. We rush in behind the hollow booming of grenades. Secure the village, a sergeant calls. He points towards the enemy. The enemy. A brown woman with rivers of age etched deeply into her face. An old man, his eyes heavy with memory. And babies. Babies. Little enemies crying on the mud roads. Little enemies with tears running down dusty cheeks. But I know there are other enemies. They are strong and young. I am strong and young. The others, they are the real enemy. They have dogs that bark at danger, and wooden bowls that hold a day's rice, and grandmothers who stand sullen in their huts. This is my enemy. The pickup zone is just beyond a rice paddy. In the paddy, a farmer squats, waiting for the squad to pass. His stick-thin legs disappear into the shallow water, and it looks as if it is he who grows there. He is the harvest we must understand. A shot. I reach for the ground and scramble for cover. The elephant grass cuts my arms as I slide toward a low wall. Then there is an opening in the tall grass. I look around. There is the enemy. He is looking at me. We are surprised to see each other. Shocked. How young he is. We stare across the distance. I know he wants me to lift my rifle, to be the enemy. I want him to lift his rifle. I want him to turn away. In a heartbeat, we have learned too much about each other. The putt-putt of the chopper interrupts the moment. The enemy turns away and is swallowed by the lush grass that is everywhere in this land. I lift my rifle. I aim at the distant shadow. I am the enemy. I lower the rifle. My fingers clutch the webbing of the chopper. It strains with the weight of the squad. Below us, the land becomes a peaceful patchwork of greens and blues and browns. This land has wide valleys, mountains that stretch along the far horizon, rushing brown rivers, and thick green forest, and war. We land. I am glad that I am alive. As the heat of the day passes to the heat of night, I write a letter to someone I love. I wonder if my enemy is writing a letter. I am so tired. I am so very tired of this war.
Okay, so we started with a text, a video, which gave general background knowledge about the Vietnam War, the conflict there. And then we went into this historical fiction picture book. And at this point, I would stop again and ask you to write down things that you're wondering and things that you're thinking. And then have a chance to discuss those with folks near you. The last text I'm going to share from my text set tonight is an audio clip. And as you remember, we've talked about a lot in this class that text is very broad. And as you'll see as we talk about this text set assignment, I'm looking for you to use videos, audio, visuals, in addition to books. So this is my last text I'm going to share from my text set tonight. It is an audio clip of an interview with an African American sergeant from the Vietnam War. And this particular, the Library of Congress has stories from veterans, and they actually break up the interview into separate segments. So I'm just going to play one segment in which Daniel Edwards Burress talks about what it was like to come back from Vietnam as a black soldier in 1967, and what it was like to also be there as a black soldier in Vietnam.
I really do feel that it's uneven. It's uneven when you're here and knowing that you have to go there so that you can come back here and try to find make a decent living. It's unfair here before you leave. It's unfair there when you get there. The numbers that are up front, if you want to just come out and say it, you just say the blacks were always in the front and they were dropping like flies. It's almost like, maybe they tried to alter the population hoping we didn't come back. When I did come back, I was very, very unpatriotic. When I went to basketball games and they did the Pledge of Allegiance, I was so sick that I did not even stand up. People turned around and looking at me. You think I cared? I didn't care. When I came back home to tanks. See, because Martin Luther King had gotten killed. And there were tanks in the middle of Madison. I just left that stuff. Now I'm at home and I got tanks in the middle of Madison Street, people rioting, looting, It just, and I came home, there was no big welcome home. There was none of that kind of stuff. It was just, you just come home and go back to work. You see what I mean? See, the war was never declared. It was a very unpopular war. So when you see a guy with a uniform on around this time, you think he's a killer, just a butcher, So how are we supposed to feel? I want to feel like a hero. I want to feel like I've been away and I fought for my country and I did my part, while some guys got deferred by going to college and their dads got them out of their important dads in Congress got them out. They don't send their kids. I look at it like, I've always felt this way. I think it looked like old congressmen and representatives, they shelter their kids and get them off in schools and get them deferments and send them somewhere safe, but never they won't send them to Vietnam. But it's hard for a black to say, you could say you're a student, but they'll maybe shoot that down and say that, you're not taking enough hours, go. You're classified 1A, So it's just so much racism that you just gotta believe that everybody's not racist. It's scary. It's scary, the racism that's going on. And so if they don't do anything fair here, how do you think they're going to do something fair there? I used to think they'd probably be shocked to see me back home. Hell, how do you make it? You know what I mean?
When you came back.
So, what I really am aiming for us to think about here in sharing these three texts in a successive way like this is how does that being exposed to these three different texts, but all connected to the same theme, how do they really influence your thinking about that theme, roots and branches of conflict, and your thinking about and you're learning about the standard itself? So a question I'd have for you is, why do you think I titled this conceptual theme, The Roots and Branches of Conflict? And just be thinking about what other texts would be beneficial to support this same conceptual theme, and why is that? And the goal here is, with a text set like this and with these integrated units, is to help kids learn more and learn more deeply about the content that we're trying to teach them, whether that be science or social studies or other topics as well, but to use a variety of media and a variety of language arts skills to engage them in the kinds of ideas, not just the facts, of the standards that we need to teach them. So as I mentioned, the concept ladder that we would have done would have a lot of discussion in it as well. And this is something that I've worked with older kids as well. I think it could be done with younger kids. I'd like to have a discussion about that at some point. But one of the things that's also beneficial about using a concept ladder like this is that tracking of kids' thinking, what they're wondering and what they're thinking with the addition of each text, and how those different texts kind of change the thinking is something that you want to see, something you want to have a record of. And so in class, we would actually exchange these concept ladders with one another across tables and see what thinking that you can learn when you look at it through like a teacher's perspective, and seeing what people wrote as they engage with each of the texts. So when we think about that experience that we just had, and then we come back to why are we building text sets? Why were you required to do this most likely as an undergraduate at some point, and you're required to do it yet again as a graduate student? Well, these are some core things that I want you to keeping in mind as you're working on your text set this semester. So we create text sets so that students will understand concepts more deeply, so that we can improve their vocabulary acquisition, because they see vocabulary, they hear vocabulary in a number of different contexts through these different media, which increases their depth of understanding and their rate of word learning. Text sets enhance their future learning of related concepts and topics. So yes, we're talking about the Vietnam War, and we're talking about conflict. We're also talking about, I hope that you could hear it in there, the civil rights movement and different aspects of conflict, and that will carry through into talking about various other time periods in our history and global history. Also, using a variety of texts like this increases engagement, especially when it's a multimedia type of text set. We improve critical thinking, analysis, and synthesis, which that concept ladder would kind of show us that, the change of thinking and the kinds of things that you wonder, the critical thinking that you're having as you engage with each of these different texts and with one another. And text sets facilitate the development of multiliteracies, which is something we're really emphasizing a lot this semester. So I want to talk about strong versus weak text sets. I've seen both in this class and in others. So strong text sets, they build student knowledge about a concept, not just a topic. Okay, so weak text sets are very narrow. They really focus in on one topic. So let's say instead of conflict and the roots and branches of conflict and looking at conflict from various perspectives and things like that, maybe my entire text set would be just about the Vietnam War. That's not going to stick with students. That's not going to carry over and help them to make meaningful connections across various topics and even years of social studies education. Also, strong text sets have high quality texts in them, texts that are compelling, texts that are well written or well designed, that are worthy of study and that are a good model for students. So weak text sets have texts that are kind of mediocre, where there's poor writing or there's inaccurate or outdated information, or they're just plain boring. They may be commissioned texts, which means like texts that are written specifically for a curriculum. Those are usually really not high quality literature or media. Those kinds of things are written to make money, to cover a certain thing that, you know, the school district wants to cover or whatever. And when they say they cover that content, then they're more likely to get purchased. And so a lot of those things are not high quality things. Sometimes they're okay, but most of the time textbook passages or texts that were commissioned for a particular box curriculum are not high quality texts. And that results in the text really not being good models for students of quality writing, which is important. Strong text sets have a range of text types, literary and informational, and different media involved. Weak text sets focus heavily on one genre or one format. And then strong text sets have a range of levels that support student achievement at that grade level. So as all of you I know have experienced, you've been in classrooms of a particular grade level, but you have students that range in reading levels, you know, sometimes depending on the classroom, sometimes, you know, you can have 5 different years of reading levels all within the same classroom. So your text set needs to have a range of levels in it as well. And I'm specifically looking for texts that are slightly below, like 1 year below, texts that are at, and texts that are just above grade level, so that you can meet the range of students, and you can also have different levels of text that would engage different readers in different ways. Weak text sets, the text complexity levels seem to be erratic. Like, it doesn't seem like it's very well suited to any particular classroom of students in a grade level. It's kind of all over the place. And therefore, it doesn't really support the staircase of text complexity that we're looking for in a grade level according to the standards. So the next thing I want to do is look at Blackboard and look at the text set assignment description. And this is where it's located when you go to the syllabus and activity and assignment info tab and the folder activity and assignment information. You'll see also, aside from just the assignment description, the link to my Padlet example and the rubric for this assignment. So let me go ahead and pull up our Blackboard, which isn't where I thought it was. Okay, my apologies. I'm going to have to get into that real quick. There we go. Okay, so in our Blackboard site, syllabus activities, activity and assignment information, and we're looking at the assignment number 5, the multimedia annotated text set. So the first thing I want to pull up is the description, which is a PDF here, and I expect that you're going to read the description in more detail on your own when you take a look at it, but basically just going over it quickly. This assignment has 2 parts. One part is creating your text set collection. There's a typo, sorry about that. Your text set collection on Padlet. And when you're doing that, I'm going to show you a model in just a second. When you're doing that, you need to have 4 of each of these different types of media. Okay, so 4 literary trade books, and I explain what I mean by literary trade book. Notice that literary nonfiction is a literary trade book. A trade book is just a bound book that's sold at any bookstore or loaned from libraries or whatever. It's not a curriculum book is basically what that means, okay? Because like you couldn't buy a reading A to Z book at a bookstore. That's not a trade book, okay? So anyway, literary nonfiction is included. So biography, memoir, autobiography, all those kinds of literary nonfiction, those are included in here, all right? So 4 of each of these types. Informational trade books, and non-traditional, not trade books. So notice that all of these are text because the attainment of information or ideas is through reading, okay, primarily through reading. So when we think about non-traditional text, we're talking about magazine articles, which could be digital or hard copy, databases, poems, primary sources, blogs, newspapers, all of these kinds of things in which the primary way that you're getting the information or ideas is through reading, and they're not trade books. These all qualify as non-traditional text. Okay. The next media type is audio. So things like I just showed, like an interview, recordings of speeches, music, which can or doesn't have to include lyrics, podcasts, all these kinds of things. These are all audio. Again, this time, I should say, our attainment of information or ideas is primarily through hearing. And then for visual texts, and these could be photographs, they could be wordless picture books, they could be comics, illustrations, infographics. I love infographics, by the way. Again, the primary form of communication has to be through visual. There could be minimal text that's also included, but primarily, you have to see the thing, the pictures or graphics or whatnot, to be able to make meaning of it. And then finally, video. So the attainment of information in terms of video is through hearing and viewing of moving visuals. So you know how sometimes on YouTube you'll see something, it's like it shows you a picture and there's sound behind it, but it's not like a moving picture. That's not video. Okay, that's not what I'm talking about. It needs to be actual movement, moving visuals. And there's some examples here as well. All right. So the assignment format for this, so you're collecting these four examples for each of these different media. And for each piece of media, you're putting an entry on Padlet. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at my Padlet example that I also have linked on Blackboard. So, oh wait, what am I doing? Okay, so when you look here, it says, please review the assignment description provided carefully and use the example Padlet. So it's linked right here. Okay. I should probably check that, make sure it's working, but it should be working. Yeah, just is going to take you out of Blackboard. So you can see I have 3 entries that are completed. Okay, and I have some that I'm still working on. But you can see here the picture book patrol. So every entry for your annotated text set, every entry needs to have the same format. Okay, it needs to state what type of media it is. It needs to provide a summary, explain the connection to the theme of your unit, explain the complexity, and we're going to go into that a little bit further on in a separate video for tonight, and explain the instructional uses recommended with the book that you come up with. Okay, and so you can see that here I have a video, and when we talk about complexity later on, that's something that gets a little bit more complicated when we're using something like video, because it's not going to have a lexile level or something like that. So we'll talk about that a little bit further, a little bit later on. But you can see that every entry, the summary is like a sentence, maybe 2, depending on what it is. The theme connection, again, a sentence, maybe 2. Now it's nice, tight, concise writing. So you're saying a lot in a few words. But each piece of this is important. Okay. Now your audience is really one another, but it's also beyond that, because if you choose to share your Padlet or make it public, then anyone could find your Padlet and find your text set, which would be a wealth of knowledge for other teachers. But minimally, you're going to be sharing it with the people in this class. And I'll talk with you all to see if you're okay with sharing with the other section of content literacy as well, because it's a lot of work to put one of these together, and to be able to share with one another can really cut down work later on when you're building units and teaching these various content subjects in the future. Notice that you need to have the theme of your unit, the grade level, and the discipline right in the title of your Padlet. Okay? So I hope that gives you an idea of what it is that you're building here. By the way, this book is awesome. I'm going to bring it in so you can take a look at it, but very, very cool. All right, I have to figure out where I am here. Okay, so the next part that I want to talk about is text complexity. So let me go back to, to our slideshow here. So you learned a lot about text complexity in Module 2. You read articles, you practiced a little bit, you looked up some lexile levels of some texts. The whole purpose for doing that was to get you prepared to do those text complexity portions within your annotated bibliography. Okay, so just as a refresher, a reminder, when we analyze text complexity, we're looking at the quantitative information, so readability that's expressed in a lexile or grade level equivalent or other leveling system, the qualitative information that came from the SCAS rubrics that you took a look at, and then the reader task considerations, or what students are being asked to do with the text and the level of support that's given. So for our Padlet entries, you're looking at all of those factors and specifically highlighting the most important things that teachers should know when looking at those three things. Okay? There should really be a very clear connection from the complexity sections for each of your entries to the instructional uses. So for example, like because of the high vocabulary and the very long sentences within this text, the text should be used in an interactive read aloud in which the teacher is going to be able to describe some of the vocabulary or teach some of the vocabulary before the reading and support as the students are hearing the text. That's just an example. Let me show you some of my entries from my Padlet. So that literary trade book, that picture book, Patrol, this was my complexity entry for that. So it has a lexile level of 560. So it's not very difficult. It's this unit is for 8th grade, and you heard the text being read aloud to you. It's not a very challenging text. The vocabulary is not very challenging as far as readability goes. But the themes are most appropriate for 7th grade students or older. I would think that you would agree with that after hearing the text. In addition to this text, it requires that readers have background knowledge about Vietnam or about the Vietnam War to make inferences within the text, because if you don't have any of that, a lot of those things that were in that text aren't going to make that much sense. Okay, it's not going to have nearly the impact if you don't understand, the background there. So notice that I only have 2 sentences there, but I'm being very clear about both the readability aspects, the quantitative aspects, and the qualitative aspects in terms of the background knowledge that's required and the inferences that are required. And then also in my next part in my Padlet entry, then I have instructional uses and I explain a little bit about, let's see, I don't know why that pops up all the time. I said, I recommend using this text for an interactive read aloud where the teacher can pause for modeling of inferences and discuss the content of the text with students. This would be important given the reactions that some students may have to the content and the background knowledge that's needed for comprehension. So as I said, there should be a strong link between what you're talking about in terms of the complexity and what you're saying that you would recommend it being used for, again, at this particular grade level that you're including it in. All right. So let's take another look. I have to change this again. Okay. At another one, a film, the film that you watched first, which was an introduction to the Vietnam War. So the visuals that accompanied that audio in that video were extremely helpful to communicate the content clearly. It's like, you saw the outline pictures and things like that went directly along with what was being spoken, which makes the comprehension much, much easier for students. It does move fairly quickly, and it has a lot of information that's packed into a short time period, which can be difficult for students to process. So if you look on my Padlet, you'll notice what my instructional suggestions are, and talk about stopping the video and kind of checking in and checking for understanding as you're using that video. And that, because it does contain very general knowledge about the conflict in Vietnam, that it would be a good video to kind of start out the unit, to build that background knowledge maybe before students are exposed to the picture book patrol. All right. And then another example from my text set is an informational article, an online informational article, and it's fairly complex. So notice here I have the Flesch-Kincaid grade level is 13.3, which means that it's, above high school level. The writing of the text is challenging. It has high academic vocabulary demands. It has somewhat complex sentences, and there's a lot of information presented in a brief text. I'm going to show that to you. So when we look at that text, and you can see with Padlet, you just click, everything is linked. So I just click on that, and then it takes me directly to the article. So, by the way, Owlcation is a pretty cool site that I found, which is full of articles that are written by educators. So this is talking about the 8 main reasons for war. You can see some of the vocabulary in here: opposing. As I was going through, I saw quite a bit. Ultimately, theories. There's a lot of academic vocabulary in here. The sentence structure isn't too bad, but some of these are relatively long. Whatever the other reasons for war may be, there is almost always an economic motive. Motive is another one. Underlying, another one. Most conflicts, even if the stated aim of the war is presented to the public as something more noble. So the reading level of this is quite high, especially for 8th graders, completely on their own. So this is something that they might need more scaffolding with. I suggested in my instructional recommendations that it's beneficial for students to build their background knowledge about the theme, the roots and branches of conflict, and help them to make connections across topics. But that they would maybe be best if they were split into small groups and they read it they read an assigned section, on one of those 8 main reasons with a group, that was kind of a heterogeneous group where there could be various kids helping each other to comprehend the article, and then reporting out with one another the key ideas from that. All right, so you can get a sense of, first of all, how we handle the complexity. Yes, it's very difficult, but there's a lot of things in that. The structure of that, I shouldn't say structure, the organization and the features that are used within this in terms of the subheadings. The length isn't terribly long for each section. And then they give examples of each of the types of conflict or the types of war. I guess I should say reasons for war. And so that makes it more readable. It makes it more comprehensible to students despite the high reading level. Okay, so that's what we're looking for there, is to have that clear connection between complexity and instructional suggestions. One thing I wanted to note is that when you find something like an article, something, and you don't have any idea really what the complexity, readability is, I should say, there are sources for you to use. There's a video demonstration of how to use Word, basically just copying and pasting a segment of the text into Word, and then you use a certain feature within Word that allows you to get the Flesch-Kincaid grade level. Okay, so hopefully that would be helpful for you. Again, this is a purely, Flesch-Kincaid readability tests are purely based on word length and sentence length. Doesn't have anything to do with any of those qualitative factors. Okay, so a lot like Lexile. Okay, so do you feel like you're ready to get started? What questions do you have about that multimedia annotated text set? What I'd like you to do is, once you watch this video, and you get to this point, I want you to take a few minutes, if you have any questions, to go ahead and toss those on our group Telegram so that everyone can get answers to those. If you think that they're questions that pertain to everyone. If it's specific for your unit, then that's something you can text or Telegram me individually for. But if it's something that's about the assignment in general that would help everyone, it would be great if you could just go ahead and toss that question up to our group Telegram. Okay, I'm going to stop this video. Thank you. Bye.